Hey everybody, this is Ryan Weaver, the founder of Fuel to Ignite, the ministry designed to provide biblical encouragement through the struggles of life. Today we're going to be starting a brand new series called Run Your Race. Run Your Race. And it's a springboard off of a message that I did several weeks ago about how to finish well. And in that study, and in that message rather, we looked at a seminary professor who had done a study of biblical leaders in Scripture. And he had identified over 1,000 leaders in Scripture and studied on them. And he determined that he could find out how 69 of those leaders finished their life. And the question he proposed is, did they finish well? Did they finish running to the finish line, limping to the finish line, or were they disqualified from the race altogether? And of those 69 identifiable leaders, only 30% of them finished well. And we all want to finish well in life. And no one sets out to say, I want to finish poorly in my life. We all want to be like the Apostle Paul in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 7 and 8. We want to be able to say this at the end of our life. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. I know that's the way I want to finish my life. But there are so many obstacles that trip us up, that cause us to fall, that are hindrances in our ability to run the race the way we want to. And that's what we're going to examine in this series. We're going to examine some of those hindrances, but then we're going to look at the biblical solution to how to overcome those obstacles, how to overcome those hindrances. And the first hindrance we're going to look at today, and this is a very difficult one, and it affects us in a multitude of ways in our life, but it's the hurt inflicted by others. And every one of us, we've all had people in our lives who have hurt us along the way. Some of the hardest hurt to get over is church hurt, isn't it? And someone betrayed you, or someone just said something to you that ripped your heart out, and it's hard to overcome. I remember an example, and I've shared this before, but when I was first in youth ministry, I had a friend who I went to kind of in a moment of, I just needed someone to talk to. I was struggling in my first year of youth ministry. I had no formal training. I really just didn't feel like I knew what I was doing. And I just knew that I was called to do it, and God had opened up a door. And I was in my home church, and if it didn't work in Jesus' hometown, you can bet it's difficult for someone like me who was trying to do ministry, their first ministry in their home church where they grew up. And anyway, I was sharing with him some of just opening up to him, sharing my heart. And he said something I'll never forget. He just said, "Face it, Ryan, you're not qualified." And it was just such a stinging thing, and it stuck with me for so many years. And 30 years later, I can still remember exactly those words, word for word, what he said. I'll never forget it. And those words stick with you. And you've probably maybe you had a teacher along the way who said, you'll never amount to anything, or a coach that said you'll never amount to anything, or maybe you had a betrayal from a close friend or a spouse or whatever the case may be. And betrayals are so painful, and they leave just an indelible mark on our life. And I'm referencing some stories I've shared in the past, but 15 years ago when I was going through probably the greatest crisis of my life, I was going through pastoral burnout. The Lord was trying to discipline me, and He allowed calamity to come into our life. And part of that calamity was we almost went into financial ruin at the time, just to be quite honest with you. I call it financial Armageddon, and it just felt like we were going to lose everything. And those things were bad enough. But the thing that pushed me over the edge, the thing that I couldn't get over, is I had a close friend who betrayed me during that time. And it was just the last straw for me. And I was so angry. And I was like that Tim McGraw country song from years ago, where it's the name of it was Angry All the Time, I think. And it was just about a couple who broke up because the woman just had all this anger in her life, and it just affected every relationship. And that's the way it was with me. I pushed away friends, I pushed away family, and I mean, it really put a strain on our family to the point where I was probably on the verge of losing them as well. And that was the wake-up call for me, and it was the turning point for me. But some people never get past that bitterness, and they allow that bitterness to affect them for the remainder of their lives, and it prevents them from finishing well. There are other ways that people hurt us, and the people who have had to deal with bullying, incessant bullying, even not just in the school world, but you find bullying in the office world, you find bullying online, all this stuff. And or maybe it's when you were young and there was an adult that you should have been able to trust, but they took advantage of you in a very inappropriate way, and you had the scars. You've had scars for years from that, and you just never got past it. Well, I'm convinced that our life is about 10% what happened to us, and about 90% how we respond to it. And we can get stuck in our just anger, we can get stuck in our resentment, we can get stuck in our bitterness, and it can trip us up in the race of life. I love the Apostle Paul, and I've already referenced one passage where he makes some sports analogies, and I'm a big sports fan, and he talks a lot about running the race. And in another passage, he uses some similar language, and it's Galatians chapter 5, verse 7. And he's talking to the church of Galatia. And he says this. He says, "You were running a good race. Who cut in on you to keep you from obeying the truth?" Who cut in on you? Now, I want you to imagine today that you're running a physical race, and someone cuts you off. Someone cuts in on you right in front of you and boxes you in, and you're just in this crowd of people. And how do you respond to that? And maybe you can't understand that analogy. Imagine when someone cuts you off on the highway, how you respond in those moments. And most of us don't respond very well. It's a good thing there's not a camera on us in those moments when someone cuts us off, cuts in on us, so to speak. But again, imagine you're running that race and someone cuts in on you. How do you respond in those moments? And I want you to imagine how ridiculous it would be if you're running, say, an Olympic race, someone cuts in on you, and all of a sudden you just stop dead in your tracks and you start complaining to the officials, "Look what he did. Can you believe what they did?" And you get so angry and you get so upset that someone cut in on you on the race that you just plop down on the track and you just sit there and protest over what someone else did to you during the race. And I know that's a ridiculous analogy, and I'm not trying to make light of the struggles that we have, the hurts that we have, or anything like that. But in all honesty, That's effectively what we do in life so often. When someone hurts us, when someone cuts in on us, as Paul says, we just stop running the race altogether. We spend the rest of our days complaining about it to anyone who will listen and protesting the fact that they hurt us instead of moving forward with our life. And that's the hindrance that we're looking at. But today we want to focus on the rest of our time on the solution. And the best person that I can think of in Scripture to examine their life is the life of Joseph. And I love Joseph's story, and it's found in Genesis chapter 37, Genesis chapters 37 through 50. And it's a wonderful story. It's a redemptive story. But if you look at Joseph's life, if anybody had the right to be angry about how he had been treated, it was Joseph. He had had many people cut in on him in life to just do their very best to destroy his life. But he didn't allow that to happen. And I want you to see how Joseph responds to time after time after time when people cut in on him, when people harmed him in a way. And just see his response and see what God does in his life. And I'm not going to read any specific passages. I'm just going to kind of share his story. You know, Joseph was one of the 12 sons of Jacob. And he was one of the youngest sons, but Jacob had two wives, Leah and Rachel was his preferred wife by far. And Joseph was one of Rachel's sons, and he was one of the youngest. And honestly, his dad, it seems clear that he favored Joseph over the other ones, and there was some sibling rivalry, to say the least. There was really just dysfunction in this family, deep dysfunction in this family. They resented Joseph's relationship with Jacob, and they actually hated him, really. And Jacob, of course, had infamously given him this very ornate coat of many colors, and it was something that it just was a symbol of their dad's favoritism toward Joseph. And again, there was a lot of jealousy. There was a lot of hatred toward Joseph. And one day when Joseph was a teenager, he had been having these dreams, and he had had dreams where all of his brothers had bowed down to him. And when you have a dream like that, it's from God. From God. It was just hard for him to contain it. And so, I don't think he was trying to rub it in his brother's noses or anything like that. But he shared this dream, and what probably Joseph's greatest sin is his inability to read the room. But anyway, he shares to his brothers that he had this dream that they all bowed down to them, and again, it made them so angry, and they just wanted to get revenge on him. Not revenge, but they just wanted to do harm to him. And sure enough, there was a time where they were grazing the animals in the field, and it was a ways from their house, and Joseph went out to check on his brothers, and the brothers seized this as an opportunity to do away with Joseph. It's hard to even say that his own brothers wanted to do away with their brother. And they threw him in this pit, this deep pit, and they basically were going to leave him for dead. And they were all done with it. But one of the brothers just suddenly developed a conscience. He said, we can't do this. And so the alternative, instead of leaving him for dead in this pit, was to sell him into slavery. So again, Joseph, I mean, he had every right in the world to be bitter toward his family. His own brothers had at first left him for dead, and then they sold him into slavery. Well, as fate would have it, Joseph ends up in Potiphar's house, one of the leaders in Egypt. And he's a slave there, but he very soon, because of his great, he's had all these great leadership qualities. And he very soon catches the eye of Potiphar, and Potiphar sees that there's something special about this Joseph, and he notices his faithfulness, and he notices how diligent he is, and he gives him more and more responsibilities, and he's on an upward path. But not only did Potiphar notice Joseph, or not only did Joseph catch the eye of Potiphar, he also caught the eye of Potiphar's wife. And she had the hots for him. She wanted she wanted to sleep with him, and she made advances at him, and he kept resisting those advances. And finally, she cornered him one day, and again she was trying to get him to sleep with her. And Joseph resisted, and finally she was just like, trying to hold him back, and finally he just fled, and as he fled, she ripped off his outer garment. And he was just trying to do the right thing. He didn't want to sleep with his boss's wife. But she was so offended and so indignant by the fact that he resisted her advances that she falsely accuses him of rape to her husband Potiphar. And again, I mean, you can imagine Potiphar's response, and he, of course, he believes his wife, and over Joseph, this slave of his, and he is so enraged by what Joseph does that he throws Joseph into prison. Again, you can imagine what Joseph is going through. He's like, man, I'm trying to live my life for God. I'm trying to honor God in everything that I do. My brothers have left me for dead. They've sold me into slavery. And now this woman falsely accuses me, and I'm in prison. And he didn't stay in prison just for a little bit of time. He was in prison for the next 12 years of his life. 12 years wasted. 12 years falsely accused. 12 years in prison for something he did not do when he was just trying to do the right thing. And again, if anybody had reason to be bitter, if anybody had reason to be angry at the world, it was Joseph. But again, Joseph just remains faithful to God. And pretty soon he catches the palace guard's eye. And the palace guard starts giving him more and more responsibilities as well. And pretty soon he's got David over all the prisoners, and he really thought that Joseph was something special. And about 10 years into his time in prison, there's a couple other guys who are arrested. It's the Pharaoh's cupbearer and his baker. And if you don't know what a cupbearer is, the cupbearer is kind of like the right-hand man of the king or the pharaoh or whatever the case may be. And one of their responsibilities is to kind of taste test the food in case someone's trying to poison the king. And apparently he had fallen down on his job that day, and the baker had cooked something that was either it was really bad food or it was like tainted with something, and the king was just convinced that they were in on it. They were trying to kill him, so he throws both of them in prison. And these men, they both have these dreams, and they're troubling dreams, and they don't understand what they are, and so they mention them to Joseph, and Joseph interprets their dreams for them. And he accurately interprets them. And for one of them, it's great news, and for the other one, it's unfortunately a death sentence. he interprets the baker's dreams, and he says, that he's very soon would be executed, and that was the case. But the cupbearer, he said that he would be released, and he would, be able to go back to his duties, and that's exactly what he was able to do. He was released, and he was able to go back to work for the Pharaoh. And all Joseph wanted was for the cupbearer to remember him and to speak favorably of him. And of course, the cupbearer doesn't do it. And a couple more years pass, and here he is rotting in prison, wasting his life away for 12 years for something he didn't do. But a couple years later, the Pharaoh has a troubling dream. And no one in his circle of, his dignitaries, none of them, they could determine what this dream was about. And all of a sudden, the cupbearer remembers Joseph from prison. He said, I know someone who can interpret dreams. And sure enough, they summoned Joseph to Pharaoh, and Joseph correctly interprets the Pharaoh's dreams. And he basically tells him there's going to be 7 years of great prosperity in Egypt, followed by 7 years of famine, even greater than the prosperity. And Pharaoh takes it to heart, and he's just like, well, you were able to interpret my dreams. Well, I'm going to put you in charge of all this. I'm going to put you in charge of the food supply. I'm going to put you second in command for all the people. Sorry about that. I'm going to put you second in command over all of Egypt. And here it is. Joseph goes literally from the prison to the palace because of his faithfulness. And Joseph, again, he remains faithful. He does an incredible job during this time, and he builds up he does this great plan on making sure that they're well stocked and throughout the country with their food supply for the famine that's to come. And when the famine hits, it's just as bad as Joseph predicts. And again, people begin coming far and wide to get food from Egypt. Not even just Egyptians. It's people from everywhere. And of course, during that time, it's about supply and demand. And basically, they can charge what they want to for the food supply during the famine. And one of those families that ends up coming from far and wide is Joseph's own family. And they make a pilgrimage to Egypt to get food so they can just survive this famine. And again, Joseph could have taken this opportunity. He could have seized this opportunity to get back at them. He could have had them thrown in prison. He could have had them killed if he wanted to. But instead, Joseph chooses to forgive. And God has done a tremendous work in his heart and his life during this time. And unbeknownst to him, he's been doing a tremendous work in his brothers' lives as well. And they humble themselves before their brother. And there's this great scene of reconciliation and forgiveness and renewal. And there's this beautiful scene at the end where Joseph is reunited with his father. He thought his son had been killed. In fact, when his brothers had sold him into slavery all those years ago, they had taken that infamous coat of his and they had dipped it in animal's blood, and they had told their father that Joseph had been killed. So for all these years, Jacob thought his son was dead. And he's reunited with his son. And it's just a tremendous, tremendous story of reconciliation. And it's a beautiful, beautiful ending. And I love this story. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from it. And one of the things that we learn from Joseph's story is that, again, as I said earlier, it's 90% It's 10% what happens to you, and 90% how you respond to it. And in Joseph's case, he always remained faithful to God, no matter what people had done. When his brothers betrayed him, when Potiphar's wife betrayed him, when the cupbearer kind of betrayed him in a way, when his dreams seemed like they were thousands and thousands of miles away while he was stuck in prison for 12 long years, Joseph remained faithful. And secondly, this is so important, Joseph allowed God to fight his battles for him. And even though Joseph was in prison, and even though it seemed like his dreams were a million miles away, God was working in his circumstances. God was orchestrating everything. He was setting him up to use him in an incredible and glorious way. In a way that no one could have ever predicted, that he would go from the prison cell to second in command of all of Egypt. And again, it was because of Joseph's faithfulness, but it's because he allowed God to fight his battles for him. And thirdly, Joseph had a heart of forgiveness. And I want to tell you, the most important thing you can do is to forgive the people who have hurt you. And I know it's easy for me to say that, and I know you can just say, Ryan, you don't know what they did to me. You don't know how bad they hurt me. And you're right, I don't. And I believe you. I believe that those hurts are real, those hurts are valid. But I want to tell you something. The person who is in prison right now is you. If you're holding on to bitterness, if you're holding on to resentment over that person, you're falsely imprisoning yourself. I want to tell you. There's a story that I want to conclude with today, and it's, I'll never forget this. I was at a conference years ago, and you remember the movie Dead Man Walking, and it was about a guy who, he and a buddy of his had just basically tortured this young couple that they stumbled upon that were on a date in a park. They were drinking milkshakes in their car, and these two men attacked them. They killed the boyfriend, and they raped the girlfriend, and left her for dead as well. And that's why the guy was in the movie Dead Man Walking. That's why he was in prison. And there was this nun sister, I can't remember her name, that she really she visited him throughout prison and established a relationship with him and led him to the Lord and all that stuff. But this was a real life story, and I got to see the testimony of the lady who had been raped, and her testimony was forgiving the dead man walking. And I can't remember her first name, but I think it was, her last name was Morris. I want to say it was Debbie Morris. But anyway, she for years she struggled with bitterness. She struggled for bitterness, obviously, over what had been done to her, and how she was mad at those people. She was mad at God. She was even mad that this sister, this nun, was reaching out to the guy who had done things instead of reaching out to her, the one who was the victim of things. And so she had turned to alcoholism, and it almost destroyed her family. It destroyed so many relationships in her life because she couldn't let go of the bitterness. And it was just ruining her life. And finally she went through some deep therapy, and she went through years of therapy, and finally she got to the point where she realized that the prisoner in her life was not that man, but it was her, because she had not been able to let go. She had not been able to forgive. And when she was finally able to let go, when she was finally able to forgive, it burst open the prison cell in her life, and she was able to walk through that door, and she was a changed person for the rest of her life. And I want to tell you, the one thing I learned in that whole process that I went through, and I didn't go through anything as tragic as what that lady went through. But I had to learn to forgive. I had to learn to let go, or it was going to eat me alive, and it was going to destroy my family relationships as well. And that's the same with you. If you're going to get over the hurts that people have inflicted on you, the three things that you're going to need to do in life are this. You're going to need to remain faithful to God through it all. You're going to need to allow God to fight your battles for you. And thirdly, you're going to need to forgive and let go and release the prisoner that is you. Thank you so much, and may God bless you.